Okay, let's get this thing going. Or as they say, an idiom, let's get this show on the road. Quite importantly, this week, you're going to get a certificate of participation and a webinar handout. The webinar handout from this session particularly will have all the idioms and the definitions of all the idioms that we talk about today. So if you're not sure about what an idiom means during the session today, wait for the handout and you'll have the definition there. Okay? I like Gaetano's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other is what we say, yeah. Okay. The handout will contain, as I said, all the idioms from today and also the text from the slides. Okay. It's raining cats and dogs. Okay. Be careful, you need to be cats and dogs, not dogs and cats. Okay. It's a bit of a thing with idioms. You need to be very precise about how they're worded or else they are not really correct. I'm an early bird. Okay, good. Anyway, let's begin. And as I'm sure everyone knows, idioms are among the most fun things to teach students. They make students smile, whether they're new expressions, if you can, a lot of them have a funny sound, okay? And also that they can sort of understand something that they either can't say in Italian, or maybe it's something they already say in Italian, now they can say it in English, okay? Another thing that idioms does is really gives some useful languages that increases fluency. And to be honest, sometimes it gives the impression of fluency. So if you can use an idiom correctly, it's just a unit of language, a sentence, or even a couple of words that you can use in the appropriate moment, and you've said the perfect thing, exactly what a native speaker would say. And so it can give you an impression of being more fluent than you actually are. These lessons, when we teach students about idioms, they can often be used as a reward. It might be, how can I say, a bit like a meal of dessert if you do a whole lesson on idioms. Dessert's nice, but in small quantities. Okay. If you teach them occasionally, they're usually a bit more useful. We're going to be teaching a lot today because I'm going to be looking at how we would do it. Okay. Gaetano asked, what would be the origin of beating around the bush? I think the idea of beating around the bush is if you're a hunter, if you can't find the animal precisely where it is, you beat the bushes and the animal will sooner or later run out. Okay. I believe that's the idea. If you're beating around the bush, in English, the expression means that you're not being precise. You're talking in general without really talking about the matter precisely. Okay. But to be honest, that's only my guess. Okay? That's how I visualize it. But idioms is funny things. Sometimes they are the way the real meaning of them or the origin is actually not so important. It's actually lost in time. Okay? The other thing about idioms is that they can really be well incorporated into other lessons. If you're doing vocabulary about comparatives, you'll see there's a lot of comparative expressions. The sooner the better, for example, just to name one. Okay? If you're talking about animals, you can have lists of animal expressions, as blind as a bat, okay, for example. Okay? So these sort of things, they're great. Teaching animals, teach idioms at the same time. You can even get students to invent one. So, what are some characteristics of a dog? Okay. Often we say as loyal as a dog. Okay. There. Dogs are loyal as a dog. As lazy as, I don't know, they could think of a lazy animal or pick an animal and they have to talk about the adjectives that generally belong to that animal. Okay. Let me know. I've already asked you. Okay, what are your favorite English idioms? Write in the chat. Okay. Caetano has written, "A living dog is better than a dead lion." I don't know that idiom. Okay, nice one. Okay. And some of these, do these idioms have Italian equivalents? Can you think of any any idioms that have Italian equivalents? sometimes the expressions are different. Sometimes, for example, we use something that has a similar meaning, or we use one animal when Italians use another animal. Sometimes it's the same animal. A black sheep, pecora nera, okay, would be the same. Okay? But other animals occasionally are different. Okay? Anyway, by the end of this session, I hope you will all be better able to effectively present idioms to students in an engaging and accessible way. You want to make your lessons interesting, okay? Use games and activities to reinforce the association between idioms and their meaning. This is an important point, that it's not enough to just have the idiom and teach them the idiom. It's got to be connected to the appropriate use, the meaning of it. There are some expressions in Italian that might have an equivalent, but they're used in a different way, in the sense that it might mean the same thing, but we don't use it exactly the same occasions, and vice versa. There might be some things that we use in exactly the same occasions. I want you also to be able to exploit how native speakers make mistakes with idioms for further practice. Sometimes, and this is something you'll see a lot in songs, particularly in titles of newspaper articles, like headlines. They often have a play on the words. Okay, an idiom is an expression that generally has to stay like it is. You can't really vary it. If you do, it becomes often ridiculous or comic. But for that reason, altering it a little bit can often make it comic, as long as you're doing it intentionally. Okay, we'll look at a bit of that a bit later. Okay. Anyway, I want to share this picture with you, which it's not my picture, so I haven't put it in the handout, but I've given you a link to the handout. If I didn't tell you before, if you didn't hear before, all the expressions you're going to hear, all the idioms you're going to hear, the definitions are in the handout. Okay, but this idiom this picture I've given you a link to. It's a great idiom expression. These idioms are often highly visual. Okay, so the visual meaning can really help students understand the meaning, and it gives them a visual handle to help them remember the idiom. That is, the sense that if they can picture this idiom mentally, or even if you give them a picture, or as you'll see a bit later, if they can make a picture, it really helps them remember it. Okay? They contain new vocabulary that can be used independently of the idiom. So look at all the objects in this picture. Could everyone name all these objects and then associate them with the idiom? The same with animals. Learning animals is a great way to do together to learning idioms or food or things like this. Okay, comparatives, superlatives. Okay, let me know which idioms you can find in the image. Okay, can you find these idioms in this image? I don't want to put it in straight away, but let me know as soon as possible in the chat. Okay, because I think I can't remember how it is, but I think there's something about 15 or 20 different idioms in here. So I can see the one up the top. Okay, we have Maria Teresa has come up with don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Okay, yep. What about this? The watch with wings. What do we think that one might be referring to? Expression you use also in Italian. Okay? I think you used the Latin form, if I remember. Okay, time flies. Yep. Okay. What about? Do you know what this one up here with the looks like a walnut? Big cheese we have. Yep. What about the fish next to the cheese? Different kettle of fish. I'm not sure. Don't know that one is in here. I can see, just to name some that I can see, in a nutshell is the nut here. Again, I can, if you want to ask me, I can give you the definitions of them, the meanings. Okay, to smell a red herring is the red fish. To smell a red herring generally means to sense something is not right, or someone is trying to fool you. Okay? Sorry, I beg your pardon. A red herring is when someone tries to distract you by giving you false information so that you believe. For example, if you're reading a detective story, they try to make you think it's the different person. We have to spill the beans, which means to tell a secret. We have an ace up your sleeve. I think that you say that also in Italian. Okay. To be born with a silver spoon in your mouth, which means to be born rich. Anyway, these are all the ones that I can see, that I counted. There may be some more there. Okay. So in a nutshell, a piece of cake, cherry on the cake, bald as a coot, which is a type of animal. A screw loose means you're crazy. If you have a stiff upper lip, it generally means you remain calm, you don't show emotion. Born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you're rich. An earworm is a song that gets into your head and you can't forget it. Okay. To keep your cards close to your chest, to not let people know your plans, to keep sort of not be open about your feelings. A joker in the pack, I think you say also in Italian. Okay. An ace up your sleeve, I talked about earlier. To wear your heart on your sleeve, that is to show your emotions freely. I guess it's a little bit different to keep your heart cards close to your chest. To have something on a silver platter generally means to offer someone something formally. Okay. To spill the beans, to tell a secret. Big cheese, generally a big important person. A red herring, as I said, a false clue. To tie the knot, which generally means to get married. Put all your eggs in one basket, we talked about. Walking on eggshells, which means to walk very carefully. As you can see, on his back foot, he's been walking on eggshells. The shadow of your former self, which generally means you are in a bad way in respect to your past self. No room to swing a cat, which means you're in a cramped area. Okay? Also, the cat's got your tongue. Okay? You can see the cat has someone's tongue there. The cat's got your tongue means you're being silent. We often say, why don't you speak? Has the cat got your tongue? Okay? To kick the bucket, which is a way of saying to die, which is a very strange one. I don't know why it means that, but to kick the bucket is an expression which means to die. It's quite informal. To pull your socks up, to make an effort. If you have cold feet, means you're having second thoughts, particularly about getting married. From rags to riches generally means you have gone from being very poor to very rich, and time flies, which we say in Italian too. If you know any of those, if you can see any more, let me know. I'm afraid I don't have time to write the idioms in the chat, but you will, if you signed up for this webinar, you will receive the webinar handout, and they're all in there. So please don't worry about that. Okay. I can't write them in the chat now, I'm afraid. Okay. Excuse me. Anyway, we'll go on. I thought, given that we looked at that picture, I thought a nice activity could be to do a drawing activity. We have an expression there. What you can do is put students in pairs. Okay, so if you put students in pairs and you give each pair an English idiom and the meaning, they could draw it. Okay, again, some of these are not. Some idioms are a bit difficult to draw. Okay, but you can choose the more simple ones, even some of those ones from the previous page, and you could give them, for example, as cool as a cucumber. Okay, and then as calm and composed. Notice that we're using that expression, which is a comparative of equivalence there, as cool as. So it teaches a structure at the same time. Okay, therefore, now the students have to draw a cartoon-like picture to illustrate the literal meaning of the idiom. Now, it's not necessary that they explain what the idiom means in the picture. That's going to be really hard. Okay, just as you saw on the previous picture, not many of those actually really showed what the meaning was. I had to explain what it was. But if they do the literal meaning, a cucumber with ice, okay, students now also write a sentence using the idiom in context. The student should check that these are correct. When students have finished the picture, an example, they can present it to the class. Okay? To be honest, if you wanted, you could even get the rest of the class to guess what the idiom is, if it's possible. Okay? Each group explains the idiom to the rest of the class. Okay? The teacher writes the idiom and its meaning on the board for all the students to copy. A good idea would be, even if they do these as pictures, you could put them up around the class. Okay? Maybe with the idiom, an example, and the meaning. Okay? Be a great way to decorate the class, your English classroom, a little bit. Okay? And it would, they would always have them there for reference to see. Okay? I think that could be a really good fun example. Okay? All you would need is just a couple of like the idioms to give people and maybe a meaning. To be honest, if you wanted, you could get the students to research the meaning. You could do it as a guessing game. Okay, to hit the nail on the head is an English idiom. You really hit the nail on the head when you said the team is lacking a strong defense. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, so what do we mean when we say you really hit the nail on the head? Do we mean you said something offensive? Do you mean you described a problem exactly? Or do you mean you showed your ignorance by saying something stupid? Okay? Let me know in the chat what you think. Is it 1, 2, or 3? I'll let a few more people answer before I tell you what it is. Looks like we have a consensus that it's 2, and it is 2. Okay. If you hit the nail on the head, be careful. The head is the side of the nail that you hit with the hammer. Okay. It means that you described it exactly. You really said it in precise words. Okay. This could be made into a fun, creative activity that also requires students to think about possible meanings. A really important skill to encourage language independence. Okay. This, you could divide students into pairs, give each pair a different idiom, its definition, and an example of its use. Okay? To be honest, you can find these very easily online. If you go in the web, in the handout, I've got some links, and on these links, a lot of them have lists of idioms, different idioms a day. There's some videos that talk about idioms, things like this. Okay. If you joined us the other week, we talked about music. In fact, last week's webinar, we talked about music, and there was a Katy Perry song with a lot of idioms in it. Okay? So that was sort of a lead into this one. Okay? You can find those very easy. Choose idioms that are substantially different in Italian, I would say. So don't choose the expressions like, I don't know, a black sheep, which is going to be very easy for Italians to identify because you just need to translate the words. The idiom is the same. So choose them. You'll know if they're quite different in Italian or if they don't have an equivalent. Okay? And then each pair has to write 2 alternative definitions of the idiom that could be possible for the example. So if you gave to hit the nail on the head and you gave that sentence, you really hit the nail on the head when you said the team's lacking a strong defense, then you would give them definition 2. That is the correct one. And then the students have to come up with definition 1, definition 2, and definition 3. Be careful, you'd have to make sure that they put it in a different order. You can't have every student have the number 2 as the correct answer. But they need to see what could be a possibility. And then you play it as a game. Okay? Each pair presents their definition to the rest of the class, who guess the correct meaning. Okay, so that pair comes up and says, reads the expression, the idiom, reads the example, and then gives them 3 different possibilities. Okay? The class have to guess. It's very easy. When you do these sort of games, I generally say, like I said, put in the chat 1, 2, or 3. Students can hold up 1, 2, or 3 fingers. Go like that, whatever. Okay. And they all have to hold up like that or like that. Okay. And you can see, and then you can give them the correct definition. Okay. And then the teacher puts it on the board, all the students can copy it. Okay. Great way for each student to really think about that and to make it into a fun game. Another way of teaching idioms is think about the English structures. We talked about this a little bit before, but idioms can really often be taught to reinforce common English structures. So when you're teaching particular structures, why not teach the associated idioms as well? Okay, so we often have these things, for example, as cool as a cucumber. We have as adjective, as a noun. Okay, a lot with animals we use. Okay, as quiet as a mouse, as good as gold, as safe as houses, as dumb as a bag of hammers, or sometimes a box of hammers. Okay, that's a fun one as well. Anything you see in red here, the definition will be in the handout, so don't worry. Conditionals. We have a lot of idioms that are based on conditionals, whether it's first, second, third. In fact, it's usually quite commonly the 0 or possibly the first. Okay, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If a thing is worth doing, it's worth doing well. If you can't beat them, join them. Sometimes abbreviated if you can't beat them, join them. Imperatives. We often use don't expressions. Okay? Don't cry over spilled milk. Don't hold your breath. Okay? These are expressions. Don't hold your breath. Not only used literally in the sense of to not stop breathing, but we use it often to say, don't expect it will happen soon. She said she's going to give me a gift soon. Don't hold your breath, in the sense like it's not going to happen straight away. Phrasal verbs too. There's a lot of phrasal verbs incorporated into these. Okay? To get on like a house on fire, which strangely enough actually means to get on very well. It doesn't mean to get on badly. Or to get away with murder. Literally, to get away with murder would be to kill someone and not be arrested. But to get away with murder means that you do something really bad and manage to not be punished for it. Often we might say, his parents let him get away with murder. To me, his parents are too tolerant. Okay? Don't break up a winning team. No. Idioms often include animals or food. Okay? You could incorporate these into your vocabulary lessons. Okay, to get off scot-free, another one, yep. As blind as a bat. To get the lion's share. To smell a rat, we have a picture there. To be a couch potato. And to be full of beans. Okay. Let me know if you know these expressions and if you know what they mean. Okay. To be full of beans, what do you think that means? Mixes and mistakes. This is a fun one too. okay, that idioms are often so tricky and sometimes they overlap. We have same animal or same object that we use in different expressions or similar. Even native speakers, even myself, occasionally we get them wrong, okay? And to be honest, sometimes we get them wrong deliberately as a joke, okay? So one review activity you could do would be to present some of these general mistakes to a class and get students to correct them, okay? Yeah, as someone said in the chat, to be a couch potato means to be very lazy, generally a person who spends all their time on the sofa watching TV or playing video games and doesn't like getting off the couch. Okay? Anyway, going back to this, you could get the students to correct them. So you could put in the wrong one and see if the students, as long as you identify what it is, you can see if they can do some research. Maybe they recognize it if they're at a higher level. If they're at a lower level, maybe they'll need to research it and see if they can find what the idiom is. Okay, so here we have two people speaking. So John says, I'm worried that my girlfriend's parents won't like me when I meet them next month. Jane, why are you so worried about it? John, I just can't stop thinking they won't approve of our relationship. You don't even know what's going to happen. You can burn that bridge when you come to it. Now, this is a combination of two idioms. Does anyone know? Let me know in the chat if you know what these two idioms are. Okay, we've got the bridge is the word that is in two idioms, and the person has taken one part and another part and combined them. Let me know in the chat if you know what it is. What we say, the correct one would be you can cross that bridge when you come to it. Okay. With this example, you could also try to elicit the idiom that's been mistakenly mixed with it. Okay, so I said the correct one is to cross a bridge when you come to it. The expression generally has a meaning of to worry about something when it happens, not worry about it before it happens because maybe it won't. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So Antonella said, face the problem when you meet it. Generally, we use it to say, I'm not going to worry about something until it actually happens because it may never happen. Okay? So we could say, for example, even if you lose your job, it's best not to with the people working there, as you may meet them later in your professional life. Do you know the expression, with bridges that would come into this expression? Let me know in the chat if you do. This may help you. Anyone know what it is? Burn the bridge. Very close, Antonella. Burn your bridges. Okay. Even if you lose your job, it's best not to burn your bridges with the people working there, as you may meet them later in your professional life. Okay. So, sorry, just to explain that, to burn your bridges generally means to do something that will permanently ruin a relationship, okay, because you're going to, because maybe you're angry, whereas maybe you'll need to cross that bridge later when you're retreating. Okay? Here's a few more examples, and please let me know as soon as possible in the chat if you know what the error in these underlined expressions are. Okay, so the ones underlined are not correct expressions, but there's just a small part that is incorrect. Okay, so number one, I lost my job last week, but immediately after I got an offer for a better paying one. It was a blessing in disguise. Federica had it, a blessing in disguise. Blessing in disguise is generally something that on first appearances looks bad, but after reveals itself to be good. So I lost my job, something negative. But only because I lost my job, I got an offer for a better paying one. And now something was bad, actually turned out to be a cause of something that turned out to be much better than the original situation. A blessing in disguise. Okay? If we let him do what he wants now, his behavior will get worse and worse. We need to discipline him and nip it in the butt. Okay, Gaetano has it. Nip it in the bud. Okay, if you nip something in the bud, it generally means you control it, you stop it before it gets out of control. Okay, comes from the idea of a plant. If you have roses, if you cut off the bud, it won't cause a flower. The bud is the little the before the flower opens. Okay, if you nip something in the bud, you stop it before it actually starts developing. Okay? The last one, working in finance is ruthless. All of your colleagues are so competitive. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Does anyone know this? Okay? It's a dog-eat-dog world is not correct, but it sounds very similar to the correct one. Anyway, that first one, a blessing in disguise. The second one, nip it in the bud, not the butt. Okay. The last one actually is it's a dog-eat-dog world. Dog-eat-dog world generally refers to business, and it generally refers to a situation where if you don't attack first, you will be the one attacked. Okay. So that's Gaetano. Thank you for putting in the correct one. Okay, the Italian equivalent. Okay, the jungle. Okay, it's a jungle. To be honest, you can also say in English, it's a jungle out there. Okay, which is equivalent to it's a dog-eat-dog world. Dog-eat-dog worlds may be a bit more common. So after you've taught these idioms to the class, okay, you can look up any common mistakes on the internet and make them into a similar review game. So, a lot of people are asking about the correct use. One of the things I find particularly with idioms is you need to be very careful about the prepositions, about the use of articles, etc. Okay? Nip it in the bud, not nip it in bud. Okay? It's a dog-eat-dog world. You can't say it's dog-eat-dog world. So it's very important that you use it correctly, that you teach it correctly, that you repeat it correctly, and that you don't allow your students to use it incorrectly because it will have the opposite effect. Okay? I'm sure you're familiar with Aesop's fables. Some idioms from morality tales, okay, they come from them, and the most famous being Aesop's fables. Okay? Ways to incorporate these into a lesson would be both in presenting them and in further practice. So we'll have a little bit of a look. This is in the handout again. Read the story. What's the moral? And can you think of an idiom with the same meaning? Okay. So let's have a look at this. Okay. The wind and the sun. Okay. The wind and the sun were arguing about which the stronger was. Suddenly they saw a traveller coming down the road, and the sun said, I see a way to decide our dispute. Which of us can cause that traveller to take off his cloak? Whichever of us can cause that traveller to take off his cloak shall be seen as the stronger. You begin. So the sun went behind a cloud, and the wind began to blow as hard as it would upon the traveller. But the harder he blew, the more closely did the traveller wrap his cloak around him, till at last the wind had to give up in despair. Then the sun came out and shone in all his glory upon the traveller, who soon found it hard to walk with his cloak on. Does anyone have an idea what the moral could be? Here the moral, the idiom moral, would be you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Does anyone know this expression? Catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So in this sense, honey being something sweet, vinegar being something sour, it's better to tempt people to do the right thing or to do what you want rather than tell them or be angry at them. Okay? So further practice could be a lesson on different idioms. Students' writing homework could be to choose a favorite idiom and write a short story. You know, when I say a short story like just a paragraph long, okay, with it as the moral. Okay? Again, when you talk about, for example, honey and vinegar, it doesn't mean you need to use honey in there. You just need to have a situation that might represent that. Okay. Too many cooks spoil the broth. Great one of my favorites. Okay? Although, as you can see from the picture, okay? Although you can be a little careful that there's an idiom. Does anyone know the idiom that actually contradicts that one? Okay. So there's one idiom that contradicts that. So too many cooks spoil the broth. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. My idea of the one that contradicts the too many cooks spoil the broth is an expression, many hands make light work. Many hands make light work indicates that the more people, it's going to be easier. Whereas too many cooks spoil the broth, too many people get involved, you're going to ruin it. Obviously, it doesn't mean one's correct. It just means the situations are different. Okay? So these sort of idioms, don't bite the hand that feeds you. Either students could write a story that literally talks about this, how an animal biting the person feeding its hand, or they could come up with a situation. Okay? All for one and one for all. Okay, just to come to a conclusion, some final points. I think it's always really important that you present idioms with an example of their use, or to be honest, more if you can. It's not enough to give someone the idiom without putting it into a sentence. It's not going to work. Okay? And a lot of these ones are going to be best displayed in a dialogue to show what someone says, and someone uses that as a response. Okay? Be careful with the use of grammar in idioms. Okay? Idioms are things that often date back hundreds of years or have come from other languages or have using forms that don't exist still in English. So we have some that have things that wouldn't exist in normal grammar. Waste not, want not is an example. You would say, if you don't waste it, if you don't want it, would be all correct. We generally don't put a negative after a verb. Okay? Tongue in cheek, we don't say my tongue is in my cheek. We just say he said it tongue in cheek, which means basically ironically, sarcastically, okay? Joking. Monkey see, monkey do. Again, monkey sees, monkey does would be the correct language. But you can't correct these idioms. They are like that. And we even have some that have older forms of English. If I say someone is holier than thou, it means they're very righteous. They think they are better morally than me. Okay? These are expressions that you may find the grammar or the vocabulary is old. Sometimes we even use words in unusual ways. Okay? We say, for example, to go back and forth, okay, to and fro. We don't use fro in other senses, but it exists in that expression. Okay? You need to use them very carefully. They are not flexible in their meaning or in their grammar. That is, you can't change them often. Okay? Monkey see, monkey do remains monkey see, monkey do. You can't say monkey do, monkey see. You can't say tongue in my cheek. Okay? You need to make sure it's correct, and you need to use the correct prepositions, the correct articles or lack of articles. Okay? Because I can't emphasize enough, using an idiom incorrectly will ruin its impression on your intended audience. If you use it correctly, it, as I said at the very beginning, gives an impression of fluency. If you use it incorrectly, it's actually going to have the opposite effect. Okay? That you're going to make people laugh at you, not at what you're saying. Okay? As in Italy, It is very common that idioms are local. You know, I'm from Australia. We have some Australian idioms. In America, they have others. In Scotland, Ireland, even parts of England. Okay? So just like in Italy, you have ones from Naples. You have some from other parts, Sicilian, from Milan, all of these different places. I'm sure you can all tell me ones that you have in your local dialect or local form of Italian, but the same happens in English. Okay? We have ones that are universal too, but you know, a lot of them are quite fun. A lot of them come from Shakespeare. If you're doing an introduction to Shakespeare, Google idioms from Shakespeare and you'll see how many derive from him. The green-eyed monster, jealousy, is a common expression. This comes from Othello. Right? You'll see a lot of the other ones. Be a little careful that every day on Facebook and Instagram, I see people quoting Shakespeare that they think they're quoting Shakespeare, that they're not. Okay, so be careful that not a lot of expressions come from Shakespeare, but not always the ones people think they do. Okay. Finally, some idioms are more common in an abbreviated form than complete. Let me know in the chat if you know the full forms of these common abbreviated idioms. We often say, when in Rome. This is part of a full expression, but, okay, Gaetano's got it. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, okay, which is a way of saying when you go to a different country, it's best to try to adapt to their habits rather than the habits you have at home, okay? So, for example, if I say, let me see, my friend came to Naples and wanted to have dinner at 6:30, and I said, look, you can't. In Naples, the restaurants will only open at 8 or 8:30. When in Rome, which is a way, obviously we were in Naples, not Rome, but you know, when we're in a certain place, you have to accept that that's the habit, that's the custom. If the shoe fits, or we sometimes say if the cap fits. Does anyone know the rest of that one? Time flies. We use that by itself, but we also use the fuller form sometimes. And Gaetano's got the other one, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Okay. Janella has it too. Don't count your chickens. Sometimes we just say, don't count your chickens. Okay. Be careful the difference. Time flies and the fuller form, sometimes you're using it in a bit different way. Time flies often just is a way of saying time passes quickly. But you can also say time flies when you're having fun. Okay. And Gaetano's the star of this evening. If the shoe fits, wear it. Okay? If the cap fits, wear it, which is basically a way of saying to people, you know, if you're acting, how can I say, if you are behaving in a certain way, you should accept that you're that sort of person. So if I say, you know, well, you're being very angry at me, you know, I'm not going to like you, you know, and someone says, but why? I'm a nice person. Well, if the shoe fits, wear it. Anyway, as I said, all the idioms will be in that were in here in red are going to be in definitions on the page, on the handout. So please let me know. Always, I pass on all emails that I receive asking for the handout. Let me know in the chat if you have any suggestions. So you see, if Gaetano is asking for phrasal verbs, I do have a webinar on phrasal verbs coming up. So we will look at that very soon. Okay, so phrasal verbs, we've got one about teaching phrasal verbs. So I'd love to do that. Great idea. We have many ideas for future webinars, but we do welcome your ideas. So feel free to write them in the chat now, or you can email it to me. Okay. Phrasal verbs sounds good. Okay, I'll put that for a couple of weeks. I think we have a special guest next week, but in a couple of weeks we'll do the phrasal verbs one. Thanks everyone for your attention. Okay, you'll receive a certificate of participation by email soon, so contact me there. if you don't receive it in the next week. There is an accompanying handout containing all activities and definitions for all idioms, all the ones in red, used in this webinar, as well as some useful links. Our next webinar next week will be on the 29th of March. Okay, so next Thursday. So please join us then. Okay. Maria Grazia asked for a webinar on music and songs. We did that a couple of weeks ago. I think you'll find it on our YouTube channel. Maybe not the one from a few weeks ago, but probably the one from last year. Okay, that'll still be there. Okay. Jokes could be a good idea. Pre-listening activities. Okay. Thanks, everyone. And I'll let you go. Okay. Thank you. And I hope to see you next week. Bye, bye, bye.